What's up, everyone? Welcome to the game. We're live again here on YouTube. As always, make sure you do those algorithmy things down there, like, subscribe, share. Definitely leave a comment. If we see it, we'll get you back. We've got a great show for you today. As always, we've got some really interesting news that's happened out in cybersecurity in the last week or so. We've got your hot takes that you submitted to us on LinkedIn or Reddit or Facebook or wherever we asked for them. And finally, we have an incredible partner here with us that we'll introduce later. We're going to talk about cybersecurity, the federal landscape, changing threats. There's a whole lot to go through today, so let's roll right into the news.
Yeah, what do we have, Rob? This first one that we have, if you're going to bring that up on screen. All right, Rob, sorry about that. You know, my producer gives me the thumbs down when I mess up, but you know, the future of the DOJ's civil cyber fraud initiative after Aerojet, and this is a nice write-up by Hinckley Allen that talks about the fact that the False Claims Act is starting to become used as a method of execution for dealing with people that are maybe lying about things in their contracts, right? So if you think about the DOJ is talking in this specific case around the 800-171 attestation and things that a lot of your clients have checked the box on, right? If you will, they've been the ones to say, hey, I am 800-171 compliant. What happened in this case that I think so important is that this is the first time the DOJ after October who came out and said, hey, we're going to start using False Claims Act as a method of tackling these people that are not following the rules of the contracts they've stated out. Now, they specifically talked about the MSPs at that time, but this is the first one where they actually had a whistleblower type model where an insider inside of an organization can say, we are not following those practices. We are not doing those things. And it allows the arm of the Department of Justice to prosecute those in a way that they can now say, if there's a fine, we're going to incentivize the whistleblower. And we have our first case of that. And I won't dig deeply into this one today. And it's mainly because we're going to be talking about this at length with an expert in this field of ours, an MSP that I actually respect quite a bit. And we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But I just want people to know that we are starting to see these continued efforts. And a lot of the themes today are going to be around this understanding that the United States government and really the government of the Five Eyes communities in general are not able to stem the tide of this loss. Now, they can't do a whole lot about the general SMB other than the contracts you sign with your customers and the way that you say you're going to do things. A great example of this on the MSP space would be patching, right? There was a lawsuit last year in Pittsburgh that was around an MSP not patching for an airport that got compromised. And when they were able to do that, they were able to be sued under the False Claims Act. So short story is we're starting to see mechanisms of action that allow for someone inside your organization to even potentially say, my MSP isn't doing the things they say, or my client isn't doing the things they say, and be able to actually profit from that. And instead of having to have the ability to sue and the money and the wherewithal and the pursuance, you now have the Department of Justice willing to get involved in that. Dom, if you want to take us to our next story, I think we'll get onto the poignance of this later with I might leak it, JP, if you know who it is, but we'll get to it here in a minute with our special guest. Go ahead, Dom.
Absolutely. That's a huge hammer, dude. I'm excited to talk about it. We have another piece of vulnerability news, and it's pretty interesting. It's a resurgence of Deadbolt. If you don't know what Deadbolt is, it's a strain of ransomware going after QNAPs. Right? If you have a QNAP NAS in any of your environments, this is one you want to pay attention to. And what's most interesting to me about it is pretty much precisely 1 month ago, at least as of the writing of the article we're talking about from the 17th, it's a resurgence of the same exact attack, right? So it's definitely one of the reasons that I stopped deploying things like NASs and servers on-prem, so I didn't have to worry about this junk. But here we are. So please pay attention. Make sure your QNAPs are up to date. Make sure you're looking out for those IOCs because this one's gnarly. There's even records according to the article, where the ransom was paid, unfortunately, but there was no decryption key received, right? So we're even in a scenario where you cannot get out of this ransomware. Please, 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 please patch your stuff.
I forgot about that, about Deadbolt, right? is Deadbolt the one
Yeah,
that is sometimes not going to be able to be recovered, right? Like, so
it
that's pretty
is.
rough.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for that.
yeah. You pay the ransom and they give you nothing. So it's one of those those criminals that don't do what they're going to say. Weird. Let's talk about laws because
Absolutely.
there's some new laws on the books, I think.
Yeah, you kind of hit it right. There's been a lot of movement around this understanding of we cannot protect ourselves as a country, right? Not just as a country. The UK is the same. Australia, all of the Five Eyes communities we talked about quite a bit are in the same problem where in this specific thing, we see things where we don't have enough data, we don't have the ability to help. And I just wanted to talk about two laws that have just recently been passed and were signed this week, earlier this week. One of them was the State and Local Government Cybersecurity Act. This one is a bipartisan bill that came in that was signed by President Biden this week saying that, hey, maybe we ought to establish the ability for the United States government sector to assist state and local and tribal governments with things around cybersecurity. At this point, you have the state and federal separation that creates that kind of challenge for DHS to have auspices to come help. And I'll tell a personal story on this. I actually have been an informant for the FBI and worked with the FBI quite a bit on things over the last few years, and just recently have terminated that relationship. But one of the complaints that often happened was when the FBI was coming to knock on doors, or when DHS's auspices were coming to knock on doors and saying to a company, hey, you still have this proxy shell. You still have this challenge. You still haven't closed this vulnerability. You might still have Log4j as part of your world,
Always got
right?
to
So
pull
you
out
have this
proxy shell,
piece.
man.
They legit leave them with a receptionist and ignore them. They don't show up. The executives don't take their calls. They won't talk. And in the same way, I think the federal state government aspect is similar in that they have this inability to reach the right person, or they don't have concerted efforts, or they don't have the ability to do it. So the first bill is the State and Local Government Cybersecurity Act. And it really does point towards the fact that there is a gap between federal and local resources. The other one that got passed and signed was another bipartisan bill that was the Federal Rotational Cybersecurity Work Program Act, or Workforce Program Act. And what it essentially says is if Dom started his career with the NSA and they needed his resources in the Department of Justice, they would reassign him for part of his duty to those other organizations. And this bill is setting in place the ability to do that across almost all federal organizations that need that ability to say, we have limited resources. How can we take Dom's knowledge and spend 2 months, 6 months, a year deployment in the FBI and change these practices, or in this government agency? And as you think about it, this is quite critical, both of these. The first one in the state and local, the one in Tampa, the water plant that was hacked in Tampa was on a Linksys router. I want to give you all a sec just to let that bake in. But the ultimate aspect is they
Don't come
need
after my WRT
advice.
54G.
Hey,
That thing was
WRT54
great. Can't
running,
change my. Was it
oh, what was the
Tomato
name of
back
the
in the
OS
day?
that used to run? Yeah, it was, anyways, doesn't matter.
DDWRT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, DDWRT. Yeah, it was fantastic. I may or may not have allegedly stolen internet with a CAN antenna and DDWRT with 2 antennas. Allegedly. But
Matt,
the point
you stealing
is,
something? That doesn't sound right.
I know, but it's the hacker culture to some extent, right? But I digress. But ultimately, the first one allows for the federal government to get involved with state and local, and the second one allows for the federal government to redistribute limited resources across organizations for cross-pollination, as well as that. And both of these lead toward this constant, repetitious in growth in the capabilities of the United States federal government, as well as state and local governments. And since we're talking about state and local governments, and since we're talking about the 171, I brought someone that's living in as a practitioner, trying to figure out CGIS and trying to figure out working with local governments and trying to figure out 800-171, and really somebody that I look up to. So let's kick over, Rob, if you can take us to the shot with JP and Dom and I.
Hey guys.
Howdy. All right, JP,
Howdy's
do
right.
you mind? Howdy is right. You do hail from Texas. So, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Funny story. First time I had COVID, I was in Dallas, Texas, locked in a hotel room. I could not leave. I could not go to the office I had intended to go to. And a buddy of mine said, Matt, there is not a thing in the world that can't be cured by whiskey and barbecue from Texas. And he literally stuck barbecue and whiskey in my front hotel room door and ran away and brought me. It was fantastic.
True story.
Yourself for it did help. Yes. you mind introducing yourself?
No, you guys brought back some memories on some of that. I remember doing the same thing that you guys were doing, but with a Pringles can stealing the neighbor's Wi-Fi back in the day.
That was back in the WEP days. I actually had a tripod allegedly with all the different places pointed out for the different wireless networks. I could just move it and then change it in DDWR. Anyways, but yeah, Hulu was free back then too. It was wonderful. But JP, please introduce yourself for me. Tell me a little bit about your practice, and if you don't mind, just kind of give the audience a little bit of an intro into kind of your world and what you live with every day, and then we'll dig into the meat of it.
Simple MSP, just like so many of us that are watching this today, and where some of us have come from. Started out back in the 90s and all through word of mouth only, no marketing. Jumped from about a dozen client partners. Back in the day, my business partner and I, we had to have some money. So we did it the old fashioned way and stole the idea from the law firms of a retainer. And we've been that way ever since. And now we're running about 3 million. There's about 16, 17 of us, and we're still growing. And we're noticing, like you said, we're trying to get into what we think is kind of going to be the next thing that's going to keep us from going off that cliff that you've talked about in the past, from an MSP standpoint. But that is that CGIS and going after the security compliance pieces of it and helping, advocating for that, our client partners.
Yeah. So you bring up CGIS, and one of the questions I'll ask just right up front, every MSP can just walk in and take a CGIS contract and has nothing to do to change in their organization, nothing to do to change or look at in their tools, and they're just good, right? That's the bulk of it, or Obviously. Is there something special you have to do to start working with those companies?
So for us, I'll just being completely transparent. You guys know me. I'll share the whole world with you on what we do. So we had a really good friend of ours that we all know up there in Oregon, Tim,
yep.
And he kind of got us on the right track, him and Shell, and we did exactly what they said, which was pretty close to what you said. It was easy. Go in, get all your background checks, talk to the right people, get your CGIS certification, so to speak, that you're allowed to go in and start selling CGIS remediation and gap analysis reports, which is what we started doing. And man, you're right. There's a lot of help that is needed out there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the point we make is that when you walk into these small to mid-sized government entities, right, they're already attesting, just like our 800-171 stuff that we'll talk about here in a second. They're already kind of attesting that they've got these things in place, and that's how they're able to access these CGIS networks. And I think they hold a lot of risk these days, right? And a lot of these things where, as this trickle down starts happening, as these government entities start getting audited, and we won't dwell on this too long, but you start seeing the ability for that to really have some implications to those organizations. And I'll rewind back. I was part of a legislative post audit in the state of Kansas, where they went around to a whole bunch of different posts, essentially, right? And inspected them across the standards they were already attesting to. And as they went through it, they literally got to the end of it and abandoned it in legislator section. They abandoned it because it was at like 2% adherence. They were so broken. They looked at it and said, we absolutely have to start again. And I think the point is that it takes this level of education, it takes this level of cooperation, and it also takes some accountability and inspection, right? And I think we're starting to see some of that. So let's bring it around to the news article I wanted to touch on, because you're the one that brought this back to me when I first posted it, right? And I said, hey, this is a really good write-up of this Hinckley Allen situation around Aerojet. What were your thoughts on it initially, JP? Like, help me understand kind of where your heart was when you read through that. What the same thing ultimately?
The very first thing that I thought about was that, we've heard in recent years that dark web threat actors are going after the MSPs techs and asking them basically, hey, how do we get in? What do we need to pay you to get in and breach your own non-compete? And it made me think, okay, isn't that kind of what the whistleblower stuff is doing? Who's enticing these whistleblowers to come through and talk about this stuff when there's really no need to? On that particular, article, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I think that particular person was a little upset that they lost a contract or a piece of the contract or something. And so if that's all the incentive somebody needs, then man, that's a real scary situation.
Yeah. And the point is you start
And
seeing this, it starts with federal, right? Because you know what the requirements are, you know what the rules are, it directly impacts the DOJ. But they said in the beginning that they understand MSPs and they understand this is going to be their best mechanism right now. This is when the DOJ came out last November or December, it was October, sorry, and said, hey, we're going to start prosecuting, and the way we're going to do it is FCA. And now in less than 5 months, you have a False Claims Act claim. And now, if I can make 15 to 20% to submit that False Claim Act, I've already put in 6 against Dom, like just since
Remember
the
when that
start.
happened too? Remember when we first talked about what was it? It was the Trade Commission that came out and said they're going to use the FCA, right? We all kind of thought it wasn't going to happen. Like I think the discussion was they certainly could, but they probably won't, right? And
that was exactly the
are.
words people echoed.
that's yes.
Yeah. So it's
No, it's not going to happen to us.
Yeah,
No,
we're not big enough, right, in the conversation. And so have you, in your interactions with the state and local people, are they asking these questions? Are they starting to think about these, let's just call it what it is, if you will, contracts to the federal government to access the FBI's criminal justice information system? I mean, ultimately.
It's exactly right. But I'll tell you, I think what really brought this to head for us was it wasn't even necessarily state and local governments asking us what we should be providing anyway. But we're starting to get 2 and 3 tiers down from, those primes and subprimes, like the 10 user CAD engineering firms that are having to meet these requirements. And now they're asking us, hey, do you have a SOC 2 or a SOC 3 that you can show us? Do you have your own WISP that you've gone through? Can you tell us what your background on your HR side of things, how does that go through? I mean, they're asking really tight, hard questions that when we go back and talk to our HR folks, are like, no, you're not giving them any of that information. But they want to know all this. What's your hiring and firing practice? And can you show me an example with the last person that just quit or you had to fire? And that was a big deal. And that's when I reached out to you and said, hey, this is starting to touch a little closer to just regular clients that we have, and not just the DOJ or anything that there's in their purview.
Yeah.
And
I did the hard hands.
We talked about this 100%. For a couple of years.
Yeah.
We knew this was coming. It was just a matter of time, but it's coming a lot faster than I think any of us thought it was.
Yeah, and it's coming in the form of insurance, and it's coming in the form of the DOJ, and it's coming in the form of regulation, and it's coming in the form of client maturity. Right? I have this theory that I live on that says that no product ever exceeds the maturity, service, product, whatever it is, no product ever exceeds the maturity very much or very little underneath the maturity of the consuming entity. And so the challenge is you're starting to see this shift in the consuming entity's maturity. It's because it's forced. They're losing money. They're hemorrhaging. They're losing intellectual property. You're seeing this catch up to where your customers are making you ask me questions that, quite frankly, put me into a position of having to have fights internally to make things the way they are, because that is what's changing. We all get that. And I think that's what I would distill this down to, JP, is we see it first in the regulated markets because they can be shifted faster, but they're in just as an abysmal state as small to mid-sized business, as MSPs in general, as the overall extensibility of our cyber delivery capabilities as a country to most markets. And I'm not even exclusive of enterprise. They have their own challenges. They have lots of brownfield and a lot of things there. So we are starting to see a lot of balls in motion. And I think the real call to action out of this, JP, that you and I have talked about many, many times, is MSPs need to start iterating on where they are, right? In the sense of finding a framework, digging into that, following processes, getting rid of employees that don't, coaching ones you can, hiring new ones that go that route. Like, how much turnover have you had, or have your people been pretty good about following all the new processes that you had to put in place to meet these requirements?
Well, in practice, but kind of going back to something you said a minute ago, I think to lift all tides that you've been saying for a while now to all of us, you are the average MSP of all the other MSPs and the vendors that you hang around with. If all you're going to do is look at these less immature MSPs or these and talk to them and associate with them, or these less vendors that aren't taking things seriously, or they're going to charge you for an SSO MFA to their, instead of just passing along, then you're probably going to bring your average down of your maturity level of your MSP. hang out with and talk to people that are going to make you ask some really hard questions and make you even second guess your own decisions. That's what we all need.
Yeah, 100%. Now you hit the nail on the head, right? And I think we're getting to that point of this where we want to take a couple of audience questions and jump over to that. So, Rob, do you have a couple of hot takes for us? JP, I want to thank you for being here, and I'd love for you to answer these questions with us. You kind of hit it. We've spent many years together, but got a couple of them, and we'll go ahead and tackle those now. Rob? All right. I don't know if Rob's messing with us, but we can't hear him. He does that time to time.
Yeah. I'm just making sure you're on your toes. Yeah. Thank you.
You're good. Exactly. I got one eye on you, brother.
Thank you so much for So we do have a couple questions, and I am excited to bring them to you. We're going to start off from a question here from Chuck M. Says, why do so many organizations allow their users to have full admin rights over their endpoint devices, allowing unfettered access to that cray-cray internet thingy?
I love the cray-cray internet thingy. JP, you first, baby. Get this one done. Let's do it.
The easy answer is to say that they're just not, their security maturity is not enough. But I think, honestly, from a business strategy standpoint, they're doing it because their workflow has adapted to that efficiency that allows them to just do whatever they want whenever they want. And that's one of the hard conversations that we were talking ago that they need to start looking at, and they need someone to help guide them through that.
Yeah, brother, you hit the nail on the head, right? My take on this would be, why do users have full admin rights? It's because someone hasn't come along and broken through the shell of ignorance that exists, that allows those workflows to exist. And I think the challenge is that we're so used to, as practitioners, shooting from the hip and expecting people just to trust us based on our own amazing spot on the top of the pedestal. We need to take away local admin rights because it's bad. And the challenge is, if you don't give the business flow, if you don't give the reason this needs to change and how you're going to make it still okay and how you're still going to give people what they need and access to what they need at the right times, you can't break through that veil. So mine comes around lack of the person executing and explaining that to the constituent organization, getting their buy-in, which goes right into your business processes that exist.
And remember,
right?
too, though, that the tech has come a long way, right? Back in the legacy environment times, there's some third-party products out there that'll one-time elevate you or whatever. Costs money every single endpoint. It's a whole nother operational process. You as the MSP need to introduce. If you look at like Intune and the ability to publish apps in a catalog, the user could pull up and be like, oh, I want OBS Studio because I'm going to do some live streaming.
Yeah.
It's that easy, right? So I think if we adopt that new technology into our business processes, understanding that we have a solid set of apps, Office or whatever. And now we have these extra things that not everyone needs, but I don't want to go build a bunch of groups and just deploy it to these. I just want users to go get it if they need it. Now you have that capability in a much more mature way.
Dom, am I understanding you correctly? There's some risk in just searching for applications and installing them off the internet as any person? This is crazy talk. I don't know that I believe you.
Lies. Go
ahead, JP. I cut you off, buddy.
But I think the conversation needs to go more than just kind of some of those, what we know as techies, the obvious stuff into why does your marketing intern need admin access on your Facebook to control that?
Preach it.
They don't.
For real.
Yeah.
Why does Rob need admin access to make this whole thing happen, this glorious thing that he has going right now?
Right. That's my argument. Sorry, I've been trying to take away Rob's admin access for his machine for like a hot minute. Yeah, this is a win, right?
You guys would miss me, okay? I just want you to know.
But I would enjoy the ability to click you off and on the screen. If I could get that added, I want that admin access. I need it.
Just say the word, my friend. Just say the word.
I think we've tackled that one. Let's go ahead. What else we got, brother?
All right. Coming up from someone who actually doesn't want to be known. Anonymous asks here. They want to know, how do I start a conversation about cybersecurity with a client?
JP, let's not break tradition, buddy. Start us off.
You need to have that conversation or bring them to an event where they can see what happens, how fast it happens, what the reality actually is, not something they're reading necessarily in some piece of media or hear on the news. They need to see something. And I think this is where I try to encourage Dom and Matt to really take some of the ideas that they have and take that to the road so that we can invite people to these particular events and or shows like this, that you guys can show how quickly this stuff happens. And that has opened up. Matt's done a little 2-minute clip for me, and I present it in every single presentation now for potential clients and say, look, I just need 2 minutes. Let me show you how quick this is, and I'll explain it to you. I will dumb this down into layman's terms so you can understand what this is, and it sparks great questions.
And what JP's talking about is red team simulation or attack simulation or threat actor simulation type things, where if I fired up a poisoned wireless access and turned it on right now and had the word United-Wi-Fi on it, I would probably catch about 40% of the audience that has that as an auto join network, and I can use that. And I think when you show people, when you actually make them feel it, when you help them understand it, it bridges that knowledge gap of buy-in, JP. And I think that's what you're talking about doing with that is in just a couple minutes, you're not trying to scare them. It's not FUD. It is genuinely, I want you to understand what happens when this happens. I want you to understand how easy this is so that you can help me show you how we prevent these things. And you can help me show you how you can do good hygiene.
It's just genuine, right? Like, well, FUD based on reality. Like, sure, there is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but it's a real world scenario. There were times when we sold security on just absolute garbage topics, right? That we were just trying to make money, and it was like the industry was real bad then. Now we have actual FUD of millions in losses and life, and it's a real thing. So I lean into FUD nowadays, and I'm like, hey, this does create fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but it's based on true stories. So it is what it is.
And it's also helpful for, if you think about it, it's
exercises are important. Sorry.
Yes. No, you're right. The tabletop exercise, because what FUD should end with is education, certainty, and planning, right? You should have a UCP after FUD. It should be FUD up. Never mind. Sorry. I may have put that together. But the point is, after FUD, you should have a cycle to close it. You should have ability. Yes. Thank you, JP. I sure appreciate the hard hands, buddy. But after FUD, you should have ability to educate someone and say, listen, this is why we talk about this. And I did just demonstrate an OAuth token harvest, or I did just demonstrate stealing your identity in Microsoft. But I'm also going to demonstrate how I turn that on and fix it. I'm also going to demonstrate how I bring value to this so that you don't have to think about it. And I think the problem you're really solving with some of these FUD cycles, and we're going to use FUDuct, but these FUD cycles is that you create.
Can you watch your mouth? I mean, this is a family.
I keep saying FUD. This is absolutely, Rob. I do not. This is defendable.
Wow. All right. I'm learning so much right now.
But I think if we can close that and educate around it, it's about how do you have a conversation. So the question starts with how do you have a conversation on cybersecurity? Dom, you hit it. Have a genuine one. Have conversations like my CPA would. Matt, genuinely, if you do that, this is what's going to come of it. Matt, genuinely, if you go slap that judge in the middle of him letting you off this parking ticket, you ain't getting the parking ticket off. It's not what happened, right? Like, genuinely. I digress.
Is that like true FUD, or is that, what's that one?
Well,
it's Elmer FUD.
Dom.
Shh. Be very, very quiet.
It might be. Well, you know what? We've reached the end of our allotted time. We want to be respectful of everybody that's here and listening. JP, I respect you. I love seeing your journey. I love being a part of it over the last 3 years. And, I look up to you, brother. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be here. I think your partners are lucky to have you. I think it's absolutely refreshing for me when I see so many that are not taking that are not driving forward, that are not iterating and improving. And so I only get to brag on a few, and I'm appreciative of you being here. So thank you so much.
Well,
thank you, viewers, for being here. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I go back to that average. You guys bring me up, my average up.
Eventually you'll pass me, and I'll have to have you drag me up the hill too. So it'll work out. But since you spoke up last, why don't you close us out, right? Remember to thank them. Make sure to use the YouTube thing and say subscribe down here in the bottom. And then also thank them, please, if you will, and ask them to be here next week. Yeah, down there. Thank you. All right, close us out, JP. We're great. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
Appreciate it, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next week.